The light that defeats a drone costs less than $1 to fire. The missile it replaces costs $4 million. That gap, that enormous, almost absurd gap, is at the center of one of the most important military and geopolitical stories unfolding right now, and most Americans have barely heard about it. Because here is what is actually happening. The United States Navy is in the middle of a fundamental transformation in how it fights, how it defends itself, and how it projects power on the world's oceans. And that transformation runs on photons, it runs on light. And the nations paying the closest attention, China and Russia, are not just watching, they are racing. Let's go back to something that happened quietly, without much fanfare, that most of the mainstream news cycle completely missed. The U.S. Navy's Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Preble used its high-energy laser with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance system, known as Helios, to shoot down 4 drones in a demonstration last year. 4 drones, gone, not with a missile, not with a gun, with a beam of concentrated energy fired from a ship sitting in the open ocean. And Navy Vice Admiral Brendan McClane stood at a podium in January and said something that should have been the headline of every defense publication in this country. He said, "The dream of a laser on every ship can become a real one." Now, if you're thinking, okay, so they shot down some drones in a test, big deal, stay with me, because the scale of what is actually at stake here is extraordinary. And to understand why, you have to understand the problem that laser weapons are designed to solve. Iran has been launching cheap drones like the Shahed 136, which cost somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 each. Meanwhile, the United States has been shooting them down with Patriot interceptor missiles that cost $3 to $4 million and THAAD interceptors that cost $10 million. You read that right. The United States of America, with a military budget that dwarfs nearly every other nation on Earth, has been spending millions of dollars per shot to destroy targets that cost the price of a used car. That is not a sustainable equation. That is not a winning strategy. And the people running the Pentagon know it, the people running the Navy know it, and now finally the technology to fix that equation is actually genuinely arriving. The Navy's experiences during operations in and around the Red Sea in the past few years have underscored the challenges defenders face at sea and on land when responding to large-volume drone attacks. Uncrewed aerial systems layered in with other threats like anti-ship ballistic and cruise missiles present even more complexities, and the potential for traditional air defense capabilities to be overwhelmed is real. This is not a hypothetical. This is not a war game scenario. This is what American sailors faced in the Red Sea. This is what they are facing now. And the answer that the Navy is building, the directed energy answer, the laser answer, is one that changes the economics of warfare at a fundamental level. Here is the core argument, and it is simple. Helios is destroying cheap Iranian drones for cents. Cents. Not millions, not thousands, cents. Because the cost per shot of a laser weapon is essentially the cost of electricity to power the beam. And when you are talking about a naval destroyer that is already generating enormous amounts of electricity to run its systems, you are talking about a near inexhaustible magazine. That is the revolution. Not the technology itself in isolation, but what the technology does to the fundamental logic of attack and defense. Helios can strike targets with a low energy intensity to dazzle, which means to confuse the guidance system and force a craft or missile to crash, or a high energy intensity to kill the target by overheating it. Lockheed Martin also claims the system is easily scalable, with the current architecture already capable of reaching 120 kilowatts. Beyond being a laser, Helios is an integrated weapon system and can also be used for surveillance and reconnaissance thanks to its thermal imaging, night vision, and ultra-high-definition vision, enabling it to identify, track, and assess targets up to 8 kilometers away. So it is not just a weapon, it is a sensor, it is a surveillance system, it is a whole new layer of capability built into one piece of hardware. But here is where the story gets complicated, because this is not a story of American triumph without friction. As of early 2026, the destroyer USS Preble is the only Navy vessel with a high-energy laser for counter-drone operations, the Helios system. Beyond that, the USS Dewey and USS Stockdale are each equipped with lower-powered optical dazzling interdictor, Navy lasers known as Odin. 3 ships out of a Navy that operates hundreds of vessels globally. That is the gap between having a revolutionary technology and having it everywhere it needs to be. and the Navy's own leadership has been remarkably candid about that gap. The Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Daryl Caudle, had previously said he was embarrassed at the state of his service's directed energy weapon developments. And Vice Admiral McLean had said back in 2024, "I am not content with the pace of directed energy weapons. We must deliver on this promise that this technology gives us." There is something important about that kind of honesty coming from the top of the Navy chain of command. It is not spin. It is not press release language. That is a senior military officer looking at what his institution has built and saying plainly that it is not moving fast enough. And it matters because the adversaries are not waiting. The Navy's Directed Energy Systems Integration Laboratory at Naval Base Ventura County, California, ramped up efforts to restore critical functions to the service's one-of-a-kind 150-kilowatt solid-state laser technology maturation demonstrator, starting in early March 2025. The system had originally been installed aboard the USS Portland in 2019, successfully destroyed a drone target during at-sea testing in the Gulf of Aden in May 2020, and neutralized a small surface target during additional testing in December 2021, but was deinstalled from the Portland in fiscal year 2023 after the Navy spent nearly $50 million on the effort. Think about what that means. The Navy built a laser powerful enough to kill targets in the open ocean. It worked. It proved the concept, and then they took it off the ship because the broader institutional infrastructure was not ready to absorb it. And now, because the drone threat has exploded globally, they have had to bring it back. The revived system reappeared during an exercise called Crimson Dragon held in September 2025, where it shot down 4 drone targets. The LWSD Mk2 Mod 0 is not the future of naval warfare. It is something more revealing. It is proof that the technology works, and proof that fielding it at scale remains unresolved. It showed that a 150-kilowatt class laser can track, hold, and kill in a maritime environment. And the decision to pull the SSLTM demonstrator out of storage was not just about filling a gap in an exercise, it was an admission. The Pentagon needs real hardware in the loop to understand how directed energy fits into modern combat. That sentence, "it was an admission," that is the key to this whole story. The United States military has been developing laser weapons for over a decade, and the honest assessment is that building the weapon is easier than building the military institution capable of deploying that weapon at the scale the modern threat environment demands. Now let's talk about China, because China is not sitting on the sidelines watching America work through its institutional challenges. At a Victory Day parade in China in September 2025, the world caught a glimpse of the Liaoyuan-1, a new laser weapon for naval use that was mounted on a hefty 8-wheeled transporter and showcased at the parade. The Ordnance Industry Science Technology Journal said this new weapon was designed for close-range interception of incoming missiles and drones. And then, just weeks ago, China revealed 2 more laser-based air defense systems, called the Guangjian 11E and Guangjian 21A, designed to destroy low-flying drones at close range. State television footage showed both systems engaging simulated quadcopters and loitering munitions flying at 50 to 80 meters, a known blind zone for conventional radar coverage. Both systems are equipped with phased array radar and infrared detection systems and can interconnect via both wired and wireless links to enable real-time data sharing and precise target identification and engagement. Integrated into a broader combat system, the platforms can coordinate soft and hard kill methods and link with radar and electro-optical sensors to form a rapid detect-to-destroy chain. China is not just building a laser. China is building an architecture, an integrated system of systems where directed energy weapons are woven into a broader grid of sensors, targeting, and engagement. That is a meaningful difference. That is what a nation looks like when it is serious about deploying a technology, not just demonstrating it. For the U.S. military, analysts say the main priority is deterring and defeating China, and China is more advanced than Russia or Iran when it comes to drone warfare. Also, the Indo-Pacific is a very large area, with mostly sea, and massed attacks by small drones are much less of a threat there than in Europe. But the scale of naval confrontation in that theater makes directed energy an even more critical capability. The Pacific Ocean is the chessboard, and the pieces that matter on that chessboard increasingly fire light, not bullets. Beijing recently touched off a new program to field 1 million tactical drones by 2026. Meanwhile, the U.S. reports procuring 50,000 unmanned aerial systems in 2025 and plans to acquire 200,000 more in 2027, 1 million versus 50,000. That production gap is staggering. And it is precisely that gap, China's ability to flood a battlefield with cheap, expendable drones at a scale no missile defense can economically address, that makes laser weapons not just useful, but existentially necessary for American naval strategy in the Pacific. Producing 1,000 missiles with 95% kill probabilities monthly may not be a winning strategy if an adversary can generate 5,000 drone sorties monthly. The math does not work. The economics do not work. Lasers at cents per shot are the only answer that makes the math work. The Navy estimates roughly 300 kilowatts would be needed to defeat anti-ship cruise missiles, and this requirement led to the creation of HELCAP, the High-Energy Laser Counter Anti-Ship Cruise Missile Program, intended to expedite the development, experimentation, integration, and demonstration of critical technologies to defeat incoming anti-ship cruise missiles. And there is a reason this program exists with the urgency it has. Central to the concern is China's DF-17, a medium-range hypersonic missile reportedly capable of reaching Mach 10 and striking targets more than 1,500 miles away. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles that follow predictable arcs, the DF-17 remains maneuverable as it re-enters the atmosphere, allowing it to shift direction mid-flight, which complicates interception. A single successful anti-ship missile strike could disable or destroy a carrier, turning a floating airbase into a liability. This is the scenario that keeps American naval planners awake. A Pacific conflict in which China launches wave after wave of hypersonic anti-ship missiles alongside swarms of cheap, expendable drones, designed to overwhelm missile defense systems that can only reload so fast. The laser is not a fantasy solution to that problem, but it is the only scalable, economically viable layer of defense that actually addresses the volume problem, and the Navy knows it. At the West Conference in February 2026, both the Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Caudle and Naval Surface Forces Commander Vice Admiral McLean shared details about the service's vision to incorporate directed energy options on more of its vessels. President Donald Trump had announced plans in late 2025 to compel industry to develop a new class of next-generation battleships, part of what is being called the Golden Fleet, that would be equipped with hypersonic weapons, electronic railguns, and other powerful capabilities. Admiral Caudle noted that directed energy weapons will be a prominent element on the so-called Trump-class battleships, and said he sees directed energy weapons solving problems not just for shipboard use, but for base protection as well. Vice Admiral McLean also suggested that Zumwalt-class destroyers could offer a unique testbed to explore and reduce risk for lasers and other high-tech capabilities, such as hypersonic weapons, to reshape surface warfare. He noted that the Zumwalt has an amazing capability to generate electricity, which is precisely what lasers require, calling it a match made in heaven. Now let's look at Russia, because Russia's relationship to this story is its own particular kind of revealing. Russia has leaned into counterspace signaling. Moscow has deployed the Peresvet ground-based laser with some mobile intercontinental ballistic missile units and continues work to increase its power and adapt it for additional roles, while Russian state messaging has portrayed Peresvet as entering combat service. But Russia's real-world performance in Ukraine has shown something interesting. It has shown the catastrophic consequences of not having adequate drone defense at scale. In June 2025, Ukraine's Operation Spiderwebs, a cunning infiltrated drone attack, damaged or destroyed perhaps one-third of Russia's irreplaceable nuclear-capable long-range bombers, one-third of Russia's strategic bomber fleet, gone or severely damaged from drone attacks launched by a country that Russia has been fighting for years. And what does that tell you? It tells you that Russia, despite having its own directed energy programs, despite having Peresvet, despite having years of fighting in a drone-heavy environment, still could not adequately protect its most valuable strategic aircraft from small, cheap, unmanned systems. That is not a minor intelligence data point. That is a catastrophic strategic failure that every military planner in Beijing and Washington has studied intensely. On May 30th, 2025, footage emerged showing what appeared to be the first visual evidence of a Chinese-made laser air defense system used in active combat in Ukraine, operated by the Russian Special Forces unit known as Kochevnik or Nomad. China was quietly supplying Russia with laser systems for use against Ukrainian drones. This is the geopolitical web that surrounds this technology. It is not just an American military story. It is a story about which nations have the technology, which nations need it desperately, and how it flows through relationships that sometimes operate far outside the view of the public. On February 28, 2026, imagery released by United States Central Command showed a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer launching Tomahawk missiles toward targets in Iran during Operation Epic Fury. The same footage appears to confirm the operational deployment of Odin, the optical dazzling interdictor, linking a live combat strike with one of the Navy's newest shipboard laser systems. Odin was there, in a real combat operation, against Iran, alongside Tomahawks. This was not a test. This was not a demonstration. Iran and its partners have repeatedly used one-way attack drones and cruise missiles against critical infrastructure, regional adversaries, and commercial shipping, while U.S. and allied navies have invested heavily in intercepting these threats. And the United States Navy showed up to that fight with lasers already integrated into its combat architecture. The future is not coming. The future is already operational. The United States Navy is intensifying its development and investment in laser weapon systems as part of a broader Department of Defense initiative to modernize the force and integrate emerging technologies capable of countering evolving threats. A laser weapon system developed by Aurelius Systems was demonstrated in collaboration with the Joint Interagency Field Experimentation Team at the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School, successfully neutralizing a Group 1 quadcopter drone at distances of 50 and 110 meters, the latter being the longest successful laser engagement achieved by Aurelius to date. The Aurelius system was deployed atop a remote hill and operated in sentry mode, autonomously scanning the sky and ground, detecting threats, and tracking targets in real time. Autonomously. That word matters. Because what is being built here is not just a laser mounted on a ship. What is being built is an autonomous, AI-integrated, directed energy defense system that can detect, track, and destroy incoming threats without a human being pulling a trigger in real time. And that changes the entire calculus of large-scale drone warfare, because if the kill chain is fast enough, if the system can react in fractions of a second, then the swarm strategy that China has invested so heavily in becomes far less certain as a war-winning approach. The United States is not racing itself. It is racing China's industrial momentum and Russia's battlefield adaptations. And the honest answer about where that race stands right now is this. America has the best integrated, most combat-tested directed energy ecosystem in the world. Helios, Odin, Hellcat. These are real systems on real ships in real combat environments. But the scale is still insufficient. 3 ships with meaningful laser capability against a Pacific threat environment that may involve hundreds of Chinese vessels and millions of drones is not yet a solved problem. The U.S. Navy has contracted Lockheed Martin to supply its ships with defensive high-energy lasers, and the momentum is real. The political will, finally, appears to be aligning with the technical reality. The Golden Fleet Initiative, the Hellcat program, the revival of the SSLTM demonstrator, the deployment of Odin in live combat, all of these are signals that the Navy has moved past the question of whether laser weapons work and into the harder, slower, more frustrating question of how fast it can build them, test them, integrate them, and get them deployed at the scale the threat demands. And that question, the scale question, is the one that will define American naval power for the next 20 years. Not whether the technology works. It works. The USS Preble has proven that it works. Operation Epic Fury has proven that it works. The Crimson Dragon exercise has proven that it works. The question is whether American industry and American military procurement, notoriously slow, notoriously bureaucratic, notoriously prone to cost overruns and schedule delays, can move fast enough to meet a threat environment that is evolving at a pace none of the traditional timelines were built to handle. China is watching, Russia is watching, and every other nation on Earth that has looked at what happened to Russia's bomber fleet in June 2025 or watched Iranian drones fall from the sky in the Red Sea for fractions of a cent per kill is doing its own calculations about what laser weapons mean for their own military doctrine, their own procurement priorities, and their own place in a world where the rules of naval warfare are being rewritten in real time by beams of light traveling at 186,000 miles per second.